Hello everyone. This World Biodiversity Day, we have Dr. Priyadarsanan Dharma Rajan with us. He is an ecologist with more than 30 years of experience in the field of conservation biology and environmental science. And today on this platform, we would engage with him and discuss him the topics related to biodiversity conservation in the era of climate change. So we welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, sir, could you please tell about yourself, your work, and your how did you come to this field and your experiences?
I was born and brought up near a backwaters in Kerala, the Ashtamudi backwaters, which is a Ramsar site. Those are the days which I started romancing with the biodiversity, especially the birds, the migratory birds. Even our data contributed in designating Ashtamudi estuary as a biodiversity Ramsar site. Around that time, we noticed that the mangroves in Kollam town, next to the Ashtamudi backwaters, being converted to an adventure park, and the district administration was constructing a embankment in the name of protecting the mangroves. We made a lot of protests. Even we went to the Kerala High Court. That was the first case when a High Court High Court judge has to visit the site before giving a judgment. Justice K.T. Thomas visited the mangrove before giving his judgment about protecting the mangrove. Later, I joined for a PhD. That's when I started working on insects. I was studying ficus and fig insects. And after my PhD, I joined A3 as one of the faculty. When I joined for the PhD, even the word biodiversity was not popular. It was only after 1992, after the Rio Convention, the word became so popular. In A3, I started working on continued my insect taxonomy, as well as I started working on insect diversity, how the insect diversity is responding to various ecosystem functions, and also the ecosystem surface of the insects. These studies initially led me to think about the gaps in our protection policies, or our conservation policies. Our conservation policies were largely biased towards mammals. That's the biggest mistake even today we are following. I'll come to that when we talk about the importance of protected areas in mitigating the climate impacts.
Yes, sir.
Around that time, I got an opportunity to work for the conservation of the estuaries, this time the Vembanad Ramsar site. So at the same time, I am leading two programs, one on insect diversity and conservation. My lab may be the only lab focusing on insect conservation when most other labs are focusing on pest control. And in Vembanad, we have a center focusing on conservation of the heavily used landscapes like Vembanad estuary. And that led me to think more about the impacts of climate change.
So, and you have even discovered so many species of insects and some other species also. So, all the species which you have discovered, they are insects only or some others also?
All new species, what I have discovered, are insects from different families.
They are like, from what I read, it's around 40 new species. No?
More, around 100
More than
species.
40. Okay.
More, around 100 species.
Around 100 species, that's great.
Yes. Including about a dozen new genera.
Okay, sir. It's really great. So, sir, you know the importance of biodiversity. You have been in the field. You have worked in the you have done your first-hand research, and even have published so many papers. We at Climate Fact Checks we emphasize on all the issues that are contributing to climate change. We want people to know and be aware of those things. So, this World Biodiversity Day, we want to link biodiversity with that. Can you please explain us how climate change is currently affecting biodiversity? Do you also believe that climate change is now affecting the ecosystems, all the natural places, habitats, everything?
Definitely. And I strongly believe that climate change is human induced. We are the reasons. The summers are getting hotter and hotter, and we get rains whenever we don't need, and it pours. And even the grasshoppers are swarming like locusts. All these are impacts of the climate change.
Yes, sir. And that's why the habitat is also getting destroyed because of climate change and these heat events, no?
Definitely. That is what our studies also show.
Okay.
With one of my PhD students, we are studying the impact of, we are studying the ant diversity across the elevation. And we found that the temperature is the most important factor which drives the insect diversity. Not just the insect abundance and the numbers, the species, but even the distribution patterns. Alpha, beta, and gamma diversity are impacted mainly by temperature. Similarly, on another study from Dr. Shweta Basnet, who did PhD in Atri, she was studying the pollination biology of the rhododendrons. And she found that in the lower elevations, rhododendrons are pollinated by flies. As it goes to the higher elevations, the flies are replaced by bumblebees. And her inference is that as the temperature increases, the flies may go up and the bumblebees may go extinct. That is what the later studies also shows, that bumblebees, the higher elevation species, may go extinct early due to the climate change.
So, sir, this means that climate change is actually threatening the genetic diversity also of these species, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
There's a recent study. There are a couple of studies on the Nilgiri thars. The first study was Sony and others, who are the PhD students in Atri. They did niche modeling for the Nilgiri thar. And they found that most suitable habitats available for, you know, that Nilgiri thar is very highly endemic to Western Ghats.
Yeah.
They are found only in the higher elevations, only in Shola forest, in very few small pockets. And another 10 to 50 years, most of this habitat may be lost largely due to the climate change. And a recent study by a team of scientists from WAA and other institutions agree to that. And also they show that not only the habitat loss, the genetic diversity of the thars also will be impacted by the climate change.
So, sir, like we are also trying to adapt to this climate and all, but everything is changing. So, sir, not all species can adapt genetically to climate change, no? So, what's the scenario? Are species actually able to adapt very well to this changing climate, or we are actually losing the numbers now?
Insects are poikilothermics. Their body temperature changes according to the temperature.
Okay.
A higher temperature means more metabolism.
Okay, so their population increases.
Not necessarily always.
Okay.
For some species which can easily adapt to the increasing temperature, their population can increase.
Okay.
So because of that, the pest incidence will be much more. There are many studies show that in the coming years, due to the climate change, insects are going to destroy a lot of our crops, which can be a bigger impact on our food security. Similarly, a lot of insect vectors like the mosquitoes. We know how many new insect-borne diseases are appearing. How many more insects are, how many species of mosquitoes are spreading across. These all can be attributed to the climate change. On one side, when these species which can adapt fast spreads across the world, many species can become new pests. Some can be new vectors. But at the same time, the specialists may go extinct. The first could be the most important bees. But I told you about the bumblebees.
Yes.
Bumblebees they prefer a higher elevation, cooler places. Every degree of temperature can have an adverse impact on the diversity of the bumblebees. Similarly, for a bee foraging, bees need a lot of energy, lot of flying up and down for pollination and nectar collection. Global the increase in the temperature can barely affect their movement. They have to spend a lot of energy. We know that throughout the bees are fanning their nest to keep it cool. They have to spend more energy to cool down their nest also. Spending a lot of energy, exhausting, it can exhaust the bees, and many bees can go extinct. So the climate change has different impacts in different species, but we need more studies on that.
So the protected areas, which nowadays we see a number of increase in protected areas, will that be helpful in enhancing the genetic diversity? Because now diversity, we are losing diversity, and there is abundance of only the species which are able to adapt more. So is there any way to enhance genetic diversity by ensuring protected areas are there?
I'd say that that's a big question, at least concerning me.
Okay.
We need protected areas. They are the treasure house of the biodiversity. But the way we protect these protected areas, are we on the right track? If you take the history of the protected areas, we can see that these are all mammal oriented. Where there are more mammals, especially tigers and elephants, such areas are protected. So what happened? The smaller areas which didn't have enough larger mammals didn't get any conservation attention, and those are all lost. The best example are peninsular mangroves. Until 30 or 50 years back, we have a few hundred square kilometers of mangroves around the peninsula. Now we have only a few hundred acres around the peninsula in small patches. We lost most of the species. We lost most of the specialist species which are adapted to the mangroves. Similarly, we had a lot of small patches around throughout. In the name of gomalas, sacred groves, sapinabetas, these are all important treasure house of biodiversity, but none of these got enough conservation attention. And let us look into the kind of protection what we are providing. We are providing extreme protections to the mammals without having any concern about the ecosystem health of our forests or the protected areas. I usually go into Nagarhole as an example. The Nagarhole National Park in Karnataka has about 640 square kilometer area. Out of the 640 square kilometer, 50 to 60% are teak plantations. The rest mostly dry deciduous, some moist deciduous, and some scrub forests. In the 640 square kilometer area, there are about 30 to 40,000 cheetah, the spotted deers. 10 or 15,000 sambar, as many gaur, maybe 6 to 8,000 elephants, maybe around 100 tigers. Just imagine a grazing ground for 40,000, 30,000 or 40,000 sheep or cattle. What new plans can come up? So our focus is only on giving protection to the animals. So there is no enough water or enough food for these animals in the forest. That is leading to the conflict. They move out of the forests.
Yeah, human-animal conflicts.
Yes. If you go near the forest office or a village, in the evening you can see there is a congregation of spotted deers. That leads to the question, what was the real natural enemy of these spotted deers? It was the human beings. We totally removed that part and give protection. And so the population is increasing. And that has a bigger impact on the genetic diversity of the forest. That has a bigger impact on the vegetational diversity of the forest. That has a big impact on the ecosystem health of the forest. And this kind of protectionism is, due to this kind of protectionism, we are going to lose most of our wild animals also. So for conservation of the protection areas, first we should focus on to the ecosystem health rather than the ladder maps. Then coming to the genetic diversity, our forest may be holding about 50 to 60% of the species. But at the same time, as many or more species are seen outside the protected areas. So now the protected areas are well defined. There is a good mechanism for protecting the protected areas. Let us say only, other than the protection strategies, let us say our protected areas are protected. But the more important biodiversity is lying outside the protected areas. Just for an example, take the Vembanad Ramsar site. It's a 10,000 plus hectares of estuarine backwaters. Cochin Corporation, 3 or 4 municipalities, and about more than 100 villages are around this lake. More than 1 million people depend on this lake for directly or indirectly for their livelihood. In the same lake, there are about 150 to 200 species of fishes. Out of this 150 to 200 species of fishes, almost 80% are economically important. And this 100 or 150 species of fishes are supporting the livelihood of about 200,000 families living around the lake. And take another mollusk species, the black clam, Willurita cyprinoides. This is an endemic to the Western Ghats region.
Okay.
And this single species is supporting about 200 families. A change in the saltwater regime and the temperature can impact the breeding of this clam, putting the livelihood of as many families in peril. And recently what we have found is on another important species, the freshwater prawn macrobrachia. The catch has drastically reduced. It was the most important fishery resource of Vembanad once. So, while conserving the biodiversity or the genetic resources, the focus should not be only towards the protected areas. Every habitat, every small fragment of green, every small wetlands, whether it's a pond or a river or a lake, every mangrove patches, all are important. So it is the habitat heterogeneity what we should focus for conservation of the biological diversity. It is not just the protected areas. I'm not arguing against the protected areas. We need protected areas as the treasure house to safeguard the biological diversity. But at the same time, we have to change our strategies.
Yes, sir. Okay.
We have to shift from the protected regimes to a more scientific conservation strategy. And we need a more inclusive approaches in conservation.
Yeah, because sir, in a protected area, the main focus is always the keystone species, whereas there are 1,000 more species over there in that area. So that
is
approach
the argument. But
yes, sir.
effectively, nobody is ready to do a study accordingly. And we witness what is happening in the protected areas.
Yes, sir. So do you believe there is a research gap in understanding this relationship of how biodiversity conservation should
Obviously,
happen?
there is a research gap as well as there are research biases. Both need to be addressed. So even today, if you ask for research funds, it's easy if it is to study the tigers or elephants. Otherwise, I should call the insect a beetle as a tiger beetle or an elephant beetle. So it is not the species focal studies or species focal approaches what we need. We need a pragmatic approach without any biases. It should be more inclusive.
Because if we let's talk about insects. If we lose these species, they are also playing a good role in the ecosystem, in the biodiversity, in the life cycles, and every aspect at every ecosystem at every level, be it marine or terrestrial, they are playing their role. If we lose these species, then definitely the other parts of the food chain, they are affected. And it's also said that we humans are affected because in so many ways, like food security, if we lose biodiversity, we lose forest ecosystems. So what's your experience or what's your say on this?
Professor U. Wilson has simplified that in a single phrase. It's the little things that run this world. If the bees are lost, the world may exist only, the natural world may exist only for another 50 or 60 years. Almost 80 to 90% of the wild plants depend on insects for pollination. Most of the crops, now there are a lot of hybridization and those things are happening, but still, most of our fruits and vegetables still need some insects for pollination.
Yes, sir. So what do you think are the biggest challenges in conserving genetic diversity? Because now the changing climate is actually affecting them. So what challenges are we facing in conserving all these diversity and species now?
I doubt whether I or anybody can have a single answer for that.
So multiple challenges, like what all
There
do
are
you
multiple
think?
challenges.
Yes, sir.
There, we have to be more political. Who is responsible for this? Only the research help in conserving the biological diversity of save the humankind from the impacts of the climate change? One. I agree. It's the responsibility of everyone. All of us should need to bring in some changes in their lifestyle. But who decides our lifestyle? And who exactly is the reason for the climate change? Just for an example, take Bangalore city. Almost 50% of the people, or even more than that, they're leading a more sustainable life, I can say, because they cannot afford many of the luxuries. The migrant laborers. Similarly, people engaged in other small petty jobs supporting this other 50% or 40% of the people who can afford to hire their services. So the responsibility comes to the 40%. After this 40%, what percentage is really contributing to the climate change? Take India. Most of our villages, I can say, they're all leading a very sustainable life. They don't contribute much to the climate change. Most of villages may be carbon positive. If you, okay, I don't want to mention that example from Bombay. That can be more
Yourself, please
controversial.
proceed.
So it is, we are leading in a world which is driven by the corporate interests, and they drives our lifestyles too. So the actions should start from there, but again, is going to become a green business. I don't know how green it can be. So this, I don't know whether, say, difficult question.
Yes, sir. So these the challenges which you have mentioned are definitely they are the most important ones. Like you have kind of summed up all the challenges in these because all other things which we are conserving, you have already highlighted how protecting areas being protected, but then human wildlife conflict is also happening because the strategies and the uh, execution is not that appropriate, and all the loopholes in the planning and everything, and how these small species, you just gave a phrase and summed up all these things. So definitely our viewers will have a good understanding of this thing through this webinar, and I, on the behalf of my team, would like to thank you for giving us your time and all the valuable information which you shared with us. It's really
Thank
great
you,
to have you
Aishi.
on board.
I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yes, sir. It was a good experience, and definitely, even I got to learn a few more things. Definitely, our viewers will be really happy with this information.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.